Hey RVF family, good to see you all. So last week in our missional community groups and as a part of our sermon discussion, we were discussing John chapter 6 verses 22 through 59. We spent some time talking about the balance of God's sovereignty and human responsibility. We tried to identify what mixed motives we may have in following Jesus and the things that we seek satisfaction in outside of Him. And then we considered how the secure love of Jesus might enable us to extend safe and loving relationship to other people. Ultimately, we learned that Jesus is our satisfaction, He's our security, and our sustenance. This week, we're going to finish out John chapter 6 in our discussion time. So as we get rolling, why don't you just take a few minutes, check in with one another, pray for one another, and then before you come back to the video, read John chapter 6, verses 60 through 71, as that's the passage that we're going to focus on this week. So take some time, pray for one another. All right, so the sermon this past Sunday, John chapter 6, verses 60 through 71. It's the end of the bread of life story and discourse, and it's the part of the passage where we encounter people's response to Jesus' teaching. So in verses 60 through 66, we see that some people are actually offended by His teaching. He's confronted them on their motives. He's claimed to be a new and better Moses. And He even called them to deeper dependence upon Him by saying that they need to eat His flesh and drink His blood. And people do not like this teaching. And so when Jesus saw that they were offended, that they had been scandalized by the things that He said, His response to them was that if this is offensive to them, then there's probably going to be a whole lot more things coming from Him that they don't understand very well at all. And He said it's the Spirit who gives life, and that it's unless the Father draws someone, they will not believe. They cannot come unless the Father draws them. And so He says, many of you will not believe in me. So Jesus says this to people who are already offended, and no surprise, many of the people who were following Jesus up to that point then turned from Him and stopped following Him. And then in verses 67 through 71, what we see is Peter's confession on behalf of the 12. And Peter's confession, Jesus turns to the disciples and He says, what about you? Are you guys going to leave too? And Jesus says, or Peter says back to him, where else are we going to go? For you have the words of life. He knew that Jesus is the giver of life, that He is the Holy One of God. And that was Peter's confession about who Jesus was, his response to the hard teachings of Jesus. And so our closing thoughts from Sunday's sermon were, first of all, that true disciples make a confession of faith in Jesus. They know who He is and believe that He is the giver of life and the Holy One of God. And for us, one of the things we draw on as far as confessions go, as we heard in the sermon on Sunday, is the Apostles' Creed. Secondly, true disciples make a commitment to follow Jesus. They don't have a backup plan in case things don't work out. They trust Him completely, even in moments of doubt and when questions arise. And that's kind of where we ended Sunday morning. And so our discussion questions this week, question number 1 is this: what do you believe about who Jesus is? And that's a basic question maybe for a lot of us because we've grown up in the church maybe, or we've been around church for a while. And the question is, who is Jesus? Maybe that's an easy answer for you. But something I've found is that there are things that we have believed for such a long time that we actually haven't had to articulate or communicate to other people, that when it comes down to it and we're asked a simple question, it becomes difficult for us to provide a good answer. And so I want to give you guys an opportunity to just say out loud as clearly as possible, who do you believe Jesus to be? Who is Jesus? What is your confession of who Jesus is? And then why is it important to know what your confession of Jesus is? And how does that clear confession affect a commitment to Jesus? So who do you believe Jesus is? Why is it important to know what you believe about Jesus? And how does that clear confession help us come to an effective commitment to Jesus? So take some time and discuss that. Question number 2. What teachings of Jesus do you find most difficult or even offensive and hard to trust? And what are the life scenarios that make you question your commitment to Jesus or cause you to maybe want to consider turning back? So as we read in this story, as people heard the hard teachings of Jesus, there were many people who were like, this is crazy. I don't think I can do this. And so they turned back. They stopped believing. They stopped following Jesus. And it might be easy for us to look down on those people, but if we're honest with ourselves, we all have moments. We all have things that Jesus requires, things that he teaches, philosophies about life and how to think about our world that can be challenging to us as well. So what teachings of Jesus do you find difficult or offensive or hard to trust? And maybe what life scenarios have you encountered, do you encounter, might you anticipate encountering that would make you question your commitment to Jesus or cause you to consider turning back? Let's take some time to discuss that with one another. And number 3, how do we continue to move forward in faith when we encounter doubts and life circumstances that make us want to turn from Jesus? And what does faith in the midst of doubt and questions look like? So how do we continue to move forward in faith when we encounter doubts, questions, and difficult life circumstances? What does faith in the midst of those things look like for us? Take some time and discuss. All right, why don't you go ahead and spend some time praying for one another. Pray that the Spirit will help us to walk in faith and assurance in the midst of doubt and uncertainty. Pray that we'll embrace the whole of Jesus' person and teaching, that we would be shaped more and more into his image as we follow him. This coming Sunday, we're going to start John chapter 7. You can spend time reading and reflecting before Sunday if you'd like. Again, we'll be releasing a children's church video. The last couple weeks of those have been really cool. If you didn't catch last Sundays, it's well worth your time, even if you don't have kids. The Figgis taught a lesson, and it was a pleasure to watch. So check out the kids ministry video that will be coming out this Sunday at 8 o'clock. And I think that's it. If you have any needs, any prayer requests, just need to connect with somebody, please let us know. You can email us, you can call us, you can text us. We'd love to hear. We love you, RVF. Grace and peace.